Imagine a student who has everything going for them. They ace every subject, follow all the rules, and have every single advantage you could list in a textbook. You'd absolutely expect them to be at the top of the class, right? Well, for decades, that's pretty much exactly how Western economic theory saw India. It seemed to have all the perfect ingredients for some truly explosive growth. But the final grade? Well, it just didn't match the potential. So what the heck happened? That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve.
This is the big question, right? This is what we're really digging into. We're going to try to unpack why this perfect student didn't just get a B-, but in a lot of ways kind of failed the test. And that forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. What if the textbook itself is wrong?
All right, so first, let's take a look at that resume. Why did so many mainstream economists, the media, you name it, look at India and see a future superstar? Well, it's because on paper, it had everything that the big theories of the time, ideas like neoliberalism, which is all about free markets, and new institutional economics, which focuses on having the right laws, said was absolutely essential for success.
And when you look at this list, it's just, wow, it's almost a perfect scorecard. A democratic government, a legal system built on a Western model? Check. Ironclad private property rights perfect for business? You bet. English as an official language? That's a huge advantage for global trade. A younger, cheaper workforce than its main rivals? Check. And to top it all off, an elite class educated at the best Western universities, ready to put all those models into practice? It really seemed like a total slam dunk.
Okay, so that's the theory. That's the resume. But this is where the story takes a sharp turn. Because when you pivot from that perfect resume to the cold, hard reality, the data tells a completely different story. It shows a massive, almost unbelievable gap between what was expected and what actually happened.
Let's just start with the absolute basics. Electricity, the literal power that runs a modern economy. In India, you've got over 237 million people. That's nearly a fifth of the whole country living without it. Think about that. That's millions of people who can't study at night, run a small business from home, or even just keep food fresh. Now compare that to China, where the number is so small it's a tiny fraction of 1%. This isn't just a small gap. We're talking about a foundational, night and day difference.
And if we look at this side by side, the gap in just core production gets even wider. India's grain output is just about 60% of China's. Its fruit and vegetable output, only a third. But when we get to the literal building blocks of an industrial nation, steel and cement, the difference is just staggering. India produces only 1/9 of what China does. That's an incredible difference. So the bottom line is, how does this all add up? Well, by 2016, China's economy was 5 times larger than India's. And for the average person, that meant an income nearly 5 times higher. And here's the kicker, the part that really makes you scratch your head. Right after independence, India was actually the wealthier of the two nations. It started with a lead.
And maybe the most telling number of all is this one. In just one recent 4-year period, foreign direct investment, that's money from global companies investing in a country, didn't just slow down in India, it completely collapsed by over 96%. It actually resulted in a net outflow of money. This was a massive vote of no confidence from the rest of the world's investors, who were apparently spooked by what the source material calls a looting culture, basically a level of corruption and poor enforcement that made doing business there totally unpredictable and way too risky.
So you're faced with all this data, and you have to wonder, what are the common explanations? Well, people trot out a lot of the usual theories, but when you look at them closely, especially when you compare India and China side by side, they just don't hold water. All right, so theory number 1, the low-cost labor argument. People say China grew because its labor was so cheap. But wait a minute, India's labor is even cheaper than China's. So why didn't that work there? Then you've got this argument that China missed out on the so-called benefits of colonialism, a theory the source really just dismisses as a way of ignoring China's own independent achievements. And finally, there's the big one, that China's autocratic tradition stifles innovation. Okay, maybe, but if that's true, why hasn't democratic India, free of that supposed burden, raced ahead in technology? The facts just don't line up with the theories.
So, if the common explanations just don't work, what's the real answer? This is where we get to the core idea of the source material. It turns out the missing ingredient, the one thing Western models just assume is already there, is the market itself. A market isn't some natural thing like a forest or a river, it's a public good. It has to be built. And to build it, you need something called state capacity. So what is state capacity? It's simply the government's real-world ability to get things done. It's not about what the laws say on paper, it's about whether the state can actually build a national highway, make sure a contract signed in one city is actually honored in another, and break down local corruption to create one single unified economic space for everyone.
And this is how it works in the real world. A state with high capacity can actually unify the nation, turning a patchwork of fragmented local markets into one giant, efficient one. It can build the physical stuff, the ports, the power grids, the roads that act as the circulatory system of an economy. And crucially, it can enforce the rules of the game consistently for everybody, which lowers the cost and the risk of doing business for everyone.
So here's the direct comparison in action. China used its strong state capacity to build a single, unified domestic market where doing business was relatively cheap and predictable. In contrast, India's weaker state capacity meant the country still acted like a bunch of disconnected pieces. It was a fragmented, high-cost place to do business, even though it had all the good laws in the books. A company might have to deal with totally different rules, different levels of corruption, and logistical nightmares just to move goods from one state to another.
So, what does this all really mean? Well, this India-China comparison isn't just some interesting case study. It poses a fundamental challenge to the way we think about economic development. It pretty much forces us to go back and rethink the standard textbook models we've been using for decades.
And this, right here, is the crucial takeaway. The problem might not be with India's execution. The problem might be with the theory itself. You see, Western economics often takes for granted the things that make markets work. It mistakes the outputs of a strong state, like a functioning free market, for the inputs you need to create one. You can't just copy and paste the free market software onto a nation's hardware if that hardware, the state capacity, isn't powerful enough to run it. And that leaves us with this pretty provocative thought from the economist Ronald Coase. He predicted that the next big economic theories wouldn't come from abstract models in Western universities, but from studying the complex, real-world laboratory of places like China. And you know, the India paradox suggests he may have been exactly right. It forces us to ask whether true economic understanding comes not from a universal one-size-fits-all textbook, but from a deep respect for the messy, complicated reality of history, culture, and power.